Hello, welcome back to Refrigerated Reviews. I'm DQP. Let's get started. So, before we begin talking about Splatoon, I think it's important to talk about my gaming habits as a whole. I'm a paid game critic, which means that most of the time I only really have time to play games that I'm assigned. I only have time to play new releases. Whenever I can play games on my own time, that means I usually only play single-player games, and multiplayer games for me are a bit of a rarity. But with that being said, there are about 4 multiplayer games that I like to say that I play on a regular basis. And those 4 games are Team Fortress 2, Fistful of Frags, Titanfall, and Counter-Strike Go. And for this review of Splatoon, I'd like to focus on Team Fortress 2 and Titanfall in particular, because the most important part of these 2 games is movement. And movement, I feel, is probably the most important part and the most important new feature of Splatoon. So, let's talk about how Team Fortress 2 focuses on movement. In particular, I'd like to talk about one class, and most of these classes have some sort of unique gimmick when it comes to movement and positioning that players really need to think about. One of my favorite classes from Team Fortress 2 is the Scout, because his greatest weapon is not his shotgun, it's not his pistol, and it's not his melee weapon, it's his speed. If you watch a good Scout on Twitch or on YouTube, you'll notice how they sort of move in and out. They move in, they retreat, they move around strategically, they flank opponents. Watching a good player play a Scout is really something that's amazing to watch in action. And it feels amazing to play as well, but you really have to think when you fight. Rather than making movement a gimmick in Team Fortress 2, they make movement for the Scout a whole gameplay mechanic. And they do the same sort of thing with the Soldier as well, whereas before rocket jumping was kind of a gimmick, but now they've built the entire class around it. And the maps follow suit, and they're built around all these strategic movement options. And Titanfall does the same thing. The pilot is able to have these crazy movements. They can wall run, they can double jump, they can hop into Titans, they can shoot themselves several feet into the air after their Titans explode. And the Titans alone have movement. They all have crazy movement options, and all of the maps in Titanfall are also designed in a way that you have to really think about how you move around it. And that's what makes those games still fun in my mind, and that's why I still play them, despite the fact that everybody's kind of stopped caring about Titanfall. That's what happens when you charge $60 for your games, EA. But anyway, how does this all tie into Splatoon? Well, Splatoon has a very interesting way of moving around maps, and I wouldn't say that the maps are kind of designed around it. We'll talk about the maps in a bit. Splatoon is basically a multiplayer version of Super Mario Sunshine, if you can understand that. Basically, you're stuck in this clean, unpainted map. And the goal of your team is not to get the most kills, and not to have the highest KD ratio or whatever, is to cover the entire map in your colored ink. And by the end of the match, whoever has the most ink on the map wins. And the cool thing about ink is that when you're standing in your own ink, you can turn into a squid and swim through that ink. You've probably seen those really stupid memetic commercials that talk about how you can be a squid now and you can be a kid now. That's actually a really important and interesting gameplay mechanic that Splatoon is based all around. You know, you can shoot up walls and climb walls. You can shoot up to a sniper nest and sneak up on a sniper who's really annoying you. You know, the whole game is built around the fact that you can clear a path for yourself by painting the map and move around it with such speed and such agility that it feels exhilarating. It helps that the objective really encourages that by making the objective painting the entire map your color. And another thing that makes Splatoon awesome in that regard is that you don't have to be very good at shooters to be good at Splatoon. You know, there are some weapons that aren't very good at killing, but are designed almost exclusively for painting the map. Like this paint roller you're seeing here. It's very difficult to sneak up on opponents with this thing, but, you know, it's not built for that. It's built for painting the map as efficiently as possible and clearing a path for you and your other teammates. And that encourages teamwork, that encourages strategy, and that is awesome. Well, it would be awesome, and that was the point where we talk about a lot of Splatoon's faults. Specifically, let's start with the maps. I brought up the maps earlier, and the maps are not very good, I'm afraid. There's one map in particular that was heavily focused on the first day, which is a skate park. And in this skate park, you may have noticed from this gameplay footage that there is a sniper nest pointing directly at both spawns. And if you've played first-person shooters for a while now, you will know that that's a very, very bad idea. Because that encourages the mentality of, I'm just going to stand here and snipe at whoever comes out, and that means you're going to get spawn camped. It encourages spawn camping, which is behavior that is not very friendly toward new players. And considering that Splatoon is a game that is very kid-friendly, that's something that concerns me quite a bit. And a lot of maps have those same silly, stupid flaws. There are a lot of corridors, and it's easy to get lost, and a lot of the maps just aren't very good. And it doesn't help that these maps are randomly selected. Let's talk about how the maps are selected, because it's kind of weird, and it's kind of unique, but it's still not very good. Every 4 hours, 2 maps from the game's map pool are selected to be played that 4 hours. That map is randomly selected when you join a lobby, and here's the thing with lobbies. You can't switch weapons unless you go offline and leave the lobby and do so and then hop back in. So that means if you happen to have a weapon equipped that isn't well suited toward the map at hand, you're screwed. You gotta leave the game and switch weapons. And that discourages strategy, because the maps are random. It means you can't plan to play on a specific map and plan for a specific strategy. It means you can't play together as a team, because sometimes you'll get thrown into a team that's comprised entirely of paint rollers, and that means you're going to get steamrolled, because you're not very good at killing other players. So that is definitely an issue with Splatoon. Nintendo still has a lot of this multiplayer nonsense where they can't seem to grasp what multiplayer gaming is today. So that means that in order to join games, you first have to coordinate with your friends on Skype. If you want to play with friends, you got to coordinate first on Skype. You gotta have one friend join a random lobby, and hope to God that that random lobby isn't full by the time other players want to join. It's stupid, it's a pain in the... and Nintendo still hasn't figured out how online gaming today works. Like, if I want to play with a friend in something like Counter-Strike Global Offensive, then I can just press a button and it'll automatically join. And Nintendo doesn't seem to realize that we're at that level of convenience now. So that's very frustrating. And another thing that's very frustrating, for me at least, is that you can't play the game on the gamepad alone. You have to rely on a TV. And this sucks for me because the way I usually play Wii U games with friends is that, I have my console gaming setup here, and then I have my PC gaming setup out of view. And if I want to play Smash Brothers with friends, it means usually hopping into a Skype lobby, dragging my gamepad over to my PC setup, and playing from there. But I can't do that with Splatoon. I have to drag my microphone over to my console gaming setup and play from there. And that's just a pain in the ass. Nintendo marketed this controller as a way to play off the TV, and you can't do that with Splatoon, so that sucks. Overall, I'd say that Nintendo wanted to make a great shooter, and they did make a great shooter, but they can't seem to get their heads in the modern world, and they couldn't make a great shooter because of that. They couldn't make a shooter with the strategic value of something like Team Fortress 2 or Titanfall. But they have the basics for it, and I have a feeling that with a few patches, it could be great. But right now, for $60, I'd say it's probably not worth it. There are other things to do aside from multiplayer, like a really, really short single-player campaign. But for $60, there should be a lot more than that. That's something that EA learned the hard way with Titanfall, because not a whole lot of other people are playing Titanfall anymore, and Nintendo should have learned from that mistake. I feel like Splatoon really should have been this $20 downloadable multiplayer thing instead of a huge $60 release, because it doesn't feel like that. Or hell, make it free to play and make clothing and hats and stuff available from microtransactions, because it has hats. And all you would need to do is take away stat bonuses from them, and you have a fair, free-to-play system along the lines of Team Fortress 2. And it could be a really popular game, maybe even a system seller for the Wii U. But no, you gotta charge $60 because you're Nintendo, and you don't understand how that stuff works, and that's really frustrating. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be a downer. But if you can ignore all that stuff, if you can ignore all of the anti-strategic nonsense that's in Splatoon, and if you can get past the fact that Nintendo can't seem to get their heads in the modern world, then Splatoon is a lot of fun. But I would say, wait for a sale. Nintendo doesn't do sales often, but wait for a sale. Wait until you see it used at GameStop for something like $20. Wait. It's not a game that's worth that much yet. And I'm going to say thanks for hanging out with me this long. Thanks for allowing me to share some insight into my multiplayer gaming habits, I guess. And I will see you next week.